So, hi, everybody. We're here today at Upstream in large part to talk about this question of what do we owe each other? A pet peeve for me is that we often disagree or simply don't bother to define who we is. So, I wanted to bring in as one of our chats today, Seth Michael Larson, who has been digging into this question of who do we depend on in some of his recent research and blogging. Seth's a man of many hats. Perhaps he's most famous for being the maintainer of urllib3, which is the most downloaded package in all of Python. So if you use the Python ecosystem, most likely, for better or for worse, you depend on Seth. In his day job, he works at Elastic. He's also a Tidelift lifter, and so we're really excited to have him with us today. And I wanted to start simply with what prompted your interest in this question of who makes open source? Because we often take it for granted, right?
Yeah, so basically there's this website called the Python Package Index, and there's lots of packages on there. And I was really interested about a lot of metadata about each and every package. And so I wrote a little tool that scrapes from a couple different sources and then compiles all of this data together. And that was kind of the starting point. And I kind of added to it a little bit. There was adding of dependencies of packages, so seeing which packages depended on each other and building that tree. And then one of the critical things that I added was, okay, which accounts on the Python package index maintain each package? And so once I had done that, I kind of wanted to visualize what I had downloaded, like all that data, and I created an image, and that image was extremely striking to me. And I was like, why is this image so striking to me? And that was kind of the question that I went off to figure out. I tweeted about it and a whole bunch of people came to me and like, that image like makes me feel things. And it's like, that is really wild that this really simple image about just people that are maintaining packages and having that all be one cohesive image, like evokes a lot of emotion in people. So
I mean, it's really I love that you talk about the feels, right? Because this is very much, I think, one of the things that sometimes gets lost in the translation from this is the software we're using to, if you're using that in a professional sense, it's sometimes easy. I don't mean this negatively, but like it's sometimes easy to lose track of like who are the human beings behind that, right? And this image of yours.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It kind of like the package is what a lot of things, like a lot of times, is the focus. It's the operational aspect of open source, right? You don't think about necessarily what happens behind that. After you pip install something, you don't necessarily need to really think about the people that were involved to make that even happen. Like, and it's more than just maintainers. There's infrastructure, tools, all of that. You don't think about any of those people. It's more about like, okay, what can this package do for me? What functionality? When are there updates? What are their security fixes? All of these things are purely operational and kind of leave out the person that's doing all of the work in the background.
Right. Yeah, you don't pip install Seth. You pip install the library, right?
You don't want me in your virtual environment.
Well, except we sort of do, right? I mean, that's the trade-off. We do all want our tiny Seth inside our.
If only it worked that way, scaling serverlessly Seth as a service. I've definitely had that quoted at me before.
Oh boy. So what are the top, you started off with this like, hey, I was just curious, I created this image. What are the top kind of things that you took away from this? Like, what is it that you learned?
Yeah, so everything is iterative. It was a real iterative process for me. I started off with this image, and then I kind of went down the path of, okay, can we find the people and the packages that are most dependent on? Like, let's go maximal all the way to the max. Who is maintaining these packages that are dependent on by a lot of people? And so you go down that route, and there's a whole bunch of different metrics you can kind of pick from. There's, GitHub stargazers, there's downloads, there's how many packages are depending on this person, or how many packages, if you were to fan it out as opposed to just a direct dependency, how many of those are depending on this package. And so I kind of went through all of those, and in doing that work, I honestly just kept on adding to a list of like caveats. I was like, wow, that metric's really bad at representing this swath of the ecosystem. And oh, wow, that metric doesn't capture all of these people doing work that is important. And so that list just keeps on growing and growing. And I'm like, wait a second, why do I even need to publish anything about the packages that are important? Like, yes, that's important. We should celebrate that. But the people and the packages that are not represented by popular metrics, like that's really important too. So things like tools like pip is never going to be in your lock file, like almost always never going to be in your lock file. But like without it, Python packaging as we know it would not exist. Basically the ultimate dependency, right? Like to have any other packages, you need to have pip exist. So yeah, that would be one of the biggest things that I learned was just like, wow, there's so much nuance to all of this. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of times when you think about, okay, which packages should get funding, which packages should I contribute to, you think about sorting packages. And so it's like, okay, well, what metric are you going to pick? There's not really a good metric that captures everything. I know the OpenSSF have a criticality score project that they have. I tried that out too, and there's some biases, whatever. It does a pretty good job. I definitely like an aggregate of metrics is kind of the way to go. But yeah, there's just so much nuance. I think that's the biggest thing that I learned.
Yeah, there's certainly layers and layers and layers. I mean, this is certainly something we've run across at Tidelift, and I every time, back in the day when I used to spend a lot more time on licenses, there was a question of, well, which licenses are the most used? It's like, well, which set of packages are you looking at? How are you measuring things like pip? Another one that we keep coming across is many important libraries are just wrappers around an underlying C library. How do you deal with things like that? And of course, as we think about making open source more inclusive, there are questions like documentation, design, QA, all those things. I know you've been thinking about as well. Oh yeah, infrastructure for sure. All those things are really tough. Is there anything that you've taken away from this about what you wish other maintainers knew?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is recognizing people. If there's someone that's in your project, contributing to your project, if they're not a maintainer yet and they're doing good work, you should really consider making them a maintainer or mentoring them until they're at that level. That's a really big thing. Sustainability doesn't happen just by you being there for longer necessarily, because there's always going to be a time where you have to hang up the hat. And so there has to be some sort of continuation. And so mentoring new people to become maintainers should be like one of the top priorities for a lot of projects. Another aspect is like make sure that people's name is on stuff. I've definitely had job prospects based solely on my work in open source and how important that is in people's lives. If it's hard to prove the fact that that person is operating at a maintainer level for a variety of packages or whatever packages they're maintaining, it's going to be tough because there's lots of reasons why you wouldn't necessarily want to include someone's name or an account on like the Python package index, for example, like operational reasons, security reasons. There's lots of reasons not to do it, but make sure that those individuals are being celebrated and do it somewhere that's visible, do it somewhere that is like verifiable, it's public. I'd say that that's probably the most important thing for maintainers.
Oh, that's interesting. I'll be talking, I've already talked perhaps today with Carmen Bianca Baker of the Reuse project, and one of their, which is mostly focused on license information, but does also include authorship information in a way that's standardized. So that it'll be interesting to compare notes between you two. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, has this? I'm trying to think. I mean, that bridges, right? Part of what that project is aiming at is how do we surface this information that the maintainers already at some level know, right? They know who else authored this software with them, and they're trying to figure out how to surface that to the consumers of the software. And as we started saying just a few minutes ago, we don't pip install Seth. There's a gap in that knowledge of the package as the unit of consumption versus the package is not at the end of the day, the unit of production, right? Like the human beings are. Is there anything you wish consumers understood better about this data? Like if you could sit down in front of every large user of URL lib3 and show them, by the way, do we want to show this picture that you
Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna quickly share. Hopefully you can see that image there. So yeah, this is a very extremely small dependency graph. It just starts at requests and goes down to your lib3. I'm going to get braided for it, but I do pronounce it IDNA. I don't say IDNA, and CareDet. And then all of the human beings that are attached via metadata to the Python package index, just also included in the dependency tree. And you can see there's a couple of overlaps, and I'm in there, your lib3. Also, fellow lifter Quentin is in there. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but of course, this is, like you said, this is a small sample. I mean, do you know how offhand how many names you ended up with in your whole data set?
I think it was 180,000.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think, I think it's a little over 300,000 packages total on the Python package index. So there's a little bit of overlap there. At least somebody's maintaining 2 packages, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that happens a little more in JavaScript, where we do have some people maintaining hundreds of packages. But yeah, well, that's the thing, right? But you can't, I mean, I guess you could ship the 180,000 name version of this tree to every consumer of Python.
Yeah, I have some interesting ideas with this data set. I really would like to have an end-to-end, like you drop in your lock file and then it gives you names. Like that would be intriguing to me. It's definitely something that I'm looking at doing.
Oh man, that is such a, we could have a whole nother chat. We could bring in some design folks around that. That's something I've been interested in at least since I was at Wikipedia, because Wikipedia has these same kinds of questions of people just think of it as the article, but of course the people are really what power it, right? And so how do you recognize that in a way that scales to thousands of authors for any given article? It's a challenging one, right? And this question again of how do you get consumers to know, to care? I mean, something that I always love telling our new salespeople here is, well, open up your phone, scroll through like 10 different submenus, and eventually you'll get to legal, and you'll get to, you know, many thousands of scrolls of license information. And that simultaneously feels very important, right? Like that is a very human recognition of work that went into this stuff. And at the same time, also, who does that?
Yeah, right. Hidden away in a 3-layer deep menu are the licenses and not even the names of the people really necessarily.
Yeah, which might or might not include the names of the people. That's right.
Yeah.
How do you how do you surface that in a way that's meaningful? You know, and obviously a lot of folks are, I think, starting to experiment with that, which is a good very much a good thing.
Yeah.
But you know, and at the same time, of course, I mean, we know that this is incomplete. I'm actually curious. You mentioned 300,000 package, 180,000 names. Is part of that, and we talked a little bit about data quality, part of that gap presumably is people who maintain multiple packages. Is it possible that some of that is also you missing information of various sorts?
Yeah, so this is really only capturing from the Python package index, and actually something that I'm really interested in taking to the next level. The next step would be pulling in data from project hosts. So things like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and pulling in contributor information, because so there's actually a funny story to this graph. Quentin is not listed on our metadata because we already have 2, and 2 is a quorum. That's enough from an operational point of view. So lifter Quentin is not on the package, and so when I published the original image, he was like, "Where am I?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's only from metadata." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll add you. I'm sorry." So this is not capturing even people that are maintainers of packages. This is not capturing everyone. There are people that are doing work that it doesn't even involve code. It's triaging issues, reviewing, figuring out infrastructure, setting up services, making sure tests continue to run, make sure that docs are getting published. Like there are people that you wouldn't even capture if you were just only look at commits too. And so like this data set is so incomplete. And actually, if you like look at data from just urlib3, who is committing to urlib3, it's mostly not me. I'm reviewing and other people are committing. And so yeah, there's this huge mismatch between what people think about what it means to be a maintainer and what maintainers are doing to continue software, of high quality being released. Yeah, there's a huge mismatch there. And it's hard to represent all of that in a graph because even at this tiny scale, it's just explosive, right? Like there's so many people that are contributing to this. And I think that's another mind-blowing aspect of open source is just how big the graph gets so fast.
Yeah, well, especially in a modern era, right, where like dependency trees of thousands of packages, and then of course each of those having 5, 10, 100 people contributing to them, often in cross-cutting ways, right? Like I noticed that there's some arrows here. Ian in the middle of this image gets pointed at both, is a maintainer of both requests, and you said CareDebt?
CareDebt, I don't know. This is the first time that I'm having to vocalize the name of the library. So CareDebt is the one I came up with.
That is a very open source problem. Yeah, I always assumed like character detection, so CareDebt, but like who knows with some of these things. Yeah, exactly. So Ian's in both, and I'm sure there's more. And you maintain some other packages as well, right?
I do. I maintain a good list of packages. So yeah, and Ian's one of the, when you do the full calculation, Ian's one of the most dependent on people in the ecosystem. He maintains quite a few libraries that are very wide reaching.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's something we were talking about actually on Twitter earlier, was this notion that we tend to think there's this famous XKCD diagram that I'm sure half of the slide decks at Upstream today will have some variation on, of this one guy in Nebraska who's holding up the whole stack. But it turns out that one guy in Nebraska is not just maintaining one package. That one guy in Nebraska is actually maintaining 5 or 10 packages. So if we get, what's our natural disaster of choice in Nebraska? It's tornadoes, right? So if a tornado picks up his computer and deposits it the next state over,
Kansas.
that's like then that's a whole bunch of Kansas or Oz, or I don't know. Do you think the internet connection is better or worse in Oz?
Oh, I hope it's better.
Yeah, you're going to end up with, you end up losing not just one package at a time, but potentially, especially for people like Ian or you, right? You end up losing a whole bunch of stuff at work.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a lot of crossover with people. It tends to be that if you have time to do open source, time is the most valuable resource to maintainers. If you have some of that time, you tend to projects like you. Projects want your time, so it's very easy to spread your time to other projects as well.
Yeah, well, and I suspect also if you have the curiosity to dig in on one project, then you're also going to have the curiosity to dig in up and down the stack or adjacent in whatever project drove you there in the first place. Like I think that's certainly part of what for me is all. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that curiosity is certainly, I think, brings the joy of this for a lot of people, right? I mean, you talked again earlier about the feels of, which I'm sure, this is one of these things I think that's a big gap. There are probably some people looking at this chart and despairing, right? Like the main emotion they feel is terror or fear of, oh my goodness, there's so much going on here, so many people I'm depending on. But each of these nodes in a graph are also nodes in a community, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's all interconnected. I definitely have a great relationship with a good chunk of the people that are named here. So yeah, it's all community, really.
Yeah, and that's not something you can fake or easily replace when things change. That's for sure. You already mentioned GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. Are there other data sources you wish you could get your hands on to pull in? And if you had infinite time, infinite compute?
I don't know if it's necessarily a data source or if it's just, I hope that data sources continue to grow and get better. I know that there's a couple of efforts of mapping projects to packages. Libraries.io is a very popular one that I enjoy. But then, GitHub has their own native one as well. I'm hoping that those efforts continue to get better and better. Python packaging metadata is hard. And so if there's all of these different formats, there's all these different ways to specify it. And because of that, it becomes really hard to know how many projects actually use a certain package. I think that if we continue to work on that, like that's the entry point, right? Like that sort of measurement is the entry point into how much is this really used? Because a lot of the data that I'm collecting is only package to package, which is great. It tells you about the ecosystem, but it doesn't really tell you about how the ecosystem is being used by people that maybe necessarily have their repository either private or their repository uses a different metadata source that you're not expecting.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point there. There's, well, certainly something we've seen at Tidelift, right, is the gap between, if you look at the dependencies of open source projects on each other, that is related to, but not the same as, the dependency trees of what our customers use, right? Because since they're sitting at that outermost layer building tools, the shape of their dependency tree is similar, but definitely different to what you see when you just look at like this tree, for example.
Right? Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's really, yeah. I mean, I'm curious this is something that we see differently in different ecosystems. When you say that Python package metadata is sort of inconsistent, is that primarily a matter of simply legacy packages that haven't cleaned up metadata? Or is there still work to be done to actually specify the right metadata, some mix of all of the above?
I think it's mostly new stuff. I mean, the tried and true requirements.txt is very well supported. I can think of Poetry Lock. I can think of PyProject.toml. I can think of Flit and Hatch, and there's all of these different ways that are new, better, but not necessarily as widely supported. Poetry Lock, if I didn't mention that one, pip file. Yeah, there's just more than
I
one
was
format.
thinking even just PyPI metadata, and you're thinking there's layers and layers too. Okay,
there is layers on layers. Yeah, and there's metadata on PyPI that's really tough to get at unless you're willing to kind of fetch it yourself as well. There's handling for when wheels don't have metadata. There's all sorts of things that you have to kind of play around, but the PyPI people are figuring that out.
Yeah. I mean, they're certainly, they have the luxury relative to some of having some pretty serious investment in it lately, which is terrific, and it's certainly something we're glad to support here at Tidelift. But but it's a big, I mean, one of my pet peeves there is that the licensing information is sometimes consistent, except when it's really not consistent. But that's not specific to PyPI, right? Like that's something that's almost all the package managers get not great.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the having the license field not be an array is a difficult one immediately. Any sort of dual license package, you have a problem. There's no standard on how to specify.
Right. And there's no validation that what's going in is which is, I mean, again, I think there's one of these things, some of these projects are showing their age, not in a bad way, right? But the size of the dependency tree, size and complexity of the dependency trees we see now as a matter of course, not always what these things were designed in mind with, right? And I think that's both true of the metadata, but also again of the human beings, right?
Definitely.
We sort of assumed that, well, I'll know everybody in my dependency tree. I'll be able to give somebody I'll find somebody on IRC, and now it's like, which of 1,000 discords do I have to find them in? And
back when there was no pip, it was mostly just you go to the website and it's just a list of links and you click on the links to download the package. Yeah, that
we still see that horrifyingly sometimes in Java. The things, it's not so much the like click to download kind of thing, but there's a shocking number of websites that still date back to that point. It's always fun when one of our Java lifters is talking about some Java stuff and is like, well, and then you go to sourceforge.net and that tries to and sourceforge.net tries to is things are
Yep.
crufty once you get to that point, right?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, well, I want to say that I love what you're doing here because it is something that we don't surface. It's such an interesting and hard challenge on so many levels, right? As you're saying, the data is hard to gather, it's hard to make sense of, and it's hard to figure out how you display. And of course, then also maybe this is a good point to end on. You talked about people getting a little emotional about like seeing this human community represented this way. Do you think it's prompted any action or change in behavior from anybody? Any examples you've seen, or that's still a work in progress?
It might still mostly be a work in progress there. I think that seeing your name means a lot to people, and there's something there. There's something about it. Seeing your name listed just as like, oh yeah, this is someone that the ecosystem depends on. And I know that I've reached out to a couple of people individually whose work was particularly not covered by like any of the metrics that I was using. And I was like, you're incredible. Please, like, I want to include you in this. And they have been like really overjoyed about that and really excited. And it's like being recognized is a really big like motivator. It feels really good. It makes you feel like all of that work is being recognized. So it means something, right? Like especially if the work that you're doing isn't the type of work that necessarily like has the big number on the GitHub commit graph, or oh, my name is on this really highly visible package, or GitHub stargazers or Twitter followers, or like the numbers game, right? We kind of fall into that trap as humans of just look at the big number. So anytime that you can like recognize people on a big scale from a qualitative like point of view, it makes people feel really, really good things. So yeah, I think that's like one of the most rewarding parts of doing this work, honestly.
Well, let's get this up on a big screen at PyCon next year, and make it interactive and have everybody seeing it between keynotes, or that could just be the keynote is getting this up on screen. So on that note, thank you so much, Seth, for your time today. And yeah, I hope we all spend a little bit of time thinking about the next time you run into one of these 180,000 people in Seth's graph, how are you going to thank them? So thank you so much, Seth. Take care.
Yeah, thank you for having me.